So Sandeep, how we'll do it is that I'll speak for about
Good morning, everyone. We are commencing the experts roundtable on can the Indian manufacturing industry capitalize on the current disruption in the world economy. We have very eminent speakers with us. Mr. Subir Chakrabarti, President Designate, the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Managing Director, Exide Industries Limited. Mr. Sandeep Kumar, Managing Director, Tata Metallics and Chairperson, Metals Committee, the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Our guest of honor, Sri Arun Mishra, CEO, Hindustan Zinc. He will be joining soon. And with this, I would request Mr. Subir Chakrabarti to take the session forward. Over to Mr. Chakrabarti, sir.
So thank you, Arnav, and good morning to all of you. This is indeed a very relevant topic in today's context, because in my opinion, I think we have reached a point of inflection from where we either go forward or we do not make it. So I think it is necessary for us to ponder and think about some of the issues which we should not only discuss but execute very urgently, so that we are able to actually take advantage of the opportunity which has been presented to us and take Indian manufacturing to the next level. Now, as per Cushman and Wakefield's 2021 Global Manufacturing Risk Index, India has emerged as the second most sought after manufacturing destination across the world, second only to China. And after India comes US. So that is a great pedestal for India to be in. And the ranking is determined on 4 key parameters of the country's ability to restart manufacturing. That's the first parameter. Second one is the business environment, namely access to talent, labor, markets. The third is operating costs, labor, electricity, real estate, and so on. And fourth, last but not the least, the risks, which are political, economic, environmental. So across these 4 parameters, India has scored number 2 globally. Now, key reasons for growing focus on India can be attributed to 2 main parameters. One is India's operating conditions and cost competitiveness, and also the country's proven success in meeting outsourcing requirements has led to the increase in the ranking year on year. And the second one is plant relocations from China to India in sectors such as pharma, chemicals, and engineering. This has also led to a higher ranking. Now, if you look at another economic body, the World Economic Forum, in its white paper titled Shifting Global Value Chains, the India Opportunity, in June 2021, they have presented 5 possible transformation pathways with which India can become a manufacturing hub. As I said earlier, we are at the point of inflection. So it's very important to seize this opportunity. So which are the 5 transformational pathways? First one is from the national scale to the global scale. So far, India has always been operating kind of at a national level. But it is necessary for us for coordinated action by the private sector and government of India to help build domestic manufacturing companies that can compete globally. So this is very important. It's not good enough to be number 1 in India. We need to be somewhere within the top 3 in the whole world. The second point is second transformational pathway from cost arbitrage to capability advantage. I think this is very important. India should not become a destination for manufacturing only because we offer cheap labor or cheap power or whatever it is. There has to be a capability building and capability advantage inherent in India's manufacturing, which has to be built. From measured to accelerated integration in global value chains, increasing the pace of integration by reducing trade barriers and enabling competitive global market access for Indian manufacturers. So this is very important. I think the government has to play a major role in this. From financial incentives to agile execution on the ground. This is again another very, very important pathway because we need agility in execution and seamlessness in the way we have business dealings. From infrastructure inputs to infrastructure outcomes, focusing infrastructure development on cost saving, speed, and flexibility. Now, if I were to look at Indian manufacturing, there are two agencies which have to play a very major role. One is the government and one is the industry itself. So the government has to facilitate, has to increase the flexibility to Indian manufacturers to be able to do business seamlessly in India and globally. And the Indian private and the government sector will have to seize this opportunity. So if I were to look at what has been done recently, I think this may be pertinent. Now, if you look at the economic outlook for 21-22, we are looking, as per the statement of the government, at a GDP growth of 9.2%. And for 22-23, we are looking at 8 to 8.5% economic growth. The RBI has pegged it at 7.8%. But nonetheless, it represents a high rate of growth, although on a lower base. Now, if you look at the budget, now when I say we have to seize this opportunity, then has the government played its role in this budget? Now, in this budget, the ease of doing business, or EODB 2.0, was launched. So the budget speech claims an overall reduction of 25,000 compliances with a repeal of 1486 union laws. Greater focus on reduction in overlapping compliances. I think this is a very important point because Indian business has always complained that there are far too many regulatory bottlenecks in even wanting to start a business. It is so difficult to start a business, then it is so difficult to maintain that business because you have number of licenses, number of approvals. So the government has played its role, I think, remarkably in this sector. Scope of Parivesh as a single window for green clearances is proposed to be expanded. This is a very welcome step. Focus on trust-based governance. I think this is a very, very important step which the government has taken, both with respect to income tax as well as with respect to ease of doing business. I think trust is a very important component in generating the confidence amongst potential investors in the area of manufacturing. Integration of central and state systems for faster clearances. Unique land parcel identification number for land records. Accelerated winding of companies will be facilitated and is to be brought under 6 months via CPACE. I think it's important that we must allow unviable businesses to fail and close down. Because if we do not have that facility, if people get stuck because they have taken a wrong decision, then it becomes very difficult for a businessman to take risks. I think government has recognized this. And the last but not the least, focus on reduction in tax litigation. A lot of developments have also happened in the MSMEs and startups. I'm not going into all the details, but I must mention a key step which has been taken by the government of India in the announcement of PM Gati Shakti framework. Because one of the things which actually puts Indian business behind is, this, we do not have seamless logistics across our country. Part of the problem is getting the goods manufactured in our country abroad, but that is once it reaches the port. But even if before it reaches the port, how can we facilitate this so that the time taken can be minimum and the expenses can be really reduced so that Indian businesses can become competitive. This is one area where post-manufacturing expenses in terms of logistics, transport, customs, ports, Indian businesses have to pay a much higher price or a rate for every service that they have to get to be able to do this export. So this PM Gati Shakti framework is a very welcome step, and this is driven by 7 engines: roads, railways, airports, ports, mass transport, waterways, and logistics infrastructure. And these are to be supported by clean energy and superior IT infrastructure. I think this is going to be a great enabler for Indian business to become globally competitive. The framework will also include infrastructure development by the state governments. Data exchange between all mode operators is to be brought on a single unified platform to remove burdensome, paper-dependent procedures and delays in processing. Multimodal connectivity between mass transport and the railway system is also proposed. So this, to my mind, is a very, very significant step, and this will really expedite our desire to climb the top of the ladder in manufacturing. The national highway network will be expanded by 25,000 kilometers, which is a great step. 4 multimodal national parks contracts will be awarded in 2023. 1 product, 1 railway station will be popularized, and 400 new Vande Bharat trains to be introduced. This is again a great step because we have, across our country, we have zones of excellence. In one area we weave carpets, in another area we have other expertise. And this one platform, one product concept, I think is a great concept in which we actually popularize or showcase the expertise of that area. PM Gati Shakti Master Plan for Expressways will be formulated in next financial year. 100 PM Gati Shakti terminals will be set up in the next 3 years. So I think what the government is trying to do is to greatly increase the ease of doing business so that there are no bottlenecks for Indian businessmen, particularly in the manufacturing sector. So these are some of the initial thoughts which I thought I would share with you regarding how Indian manufacturing industry can capitalize on the current disruption in the world economy. I have a very senior panelist, Mr. Sandeep Kumar, with me, who is the Managing Director of Tata Metallics and also Chairperson of Metals Committee of BCC and I. I'll request Sandeep to share your thoughts with the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chakravarti. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to be here on a subject which is often debated. And I don't think this is the first time we have spoken about this subject. This has been discussed ad nauseum in various forums. But nevertheless, let's try and discuss some, basics. So, if you look at the subject, it says, can Indian manufacturing capitalize on the current disruption in the world economy? I think, first of all, we need to understand what disruption are we talking about? And what opportunities is this throwing up for the Indian manufacturing industry? Secondly, I would like to look at rather, review the current state of the Indian manufacturing. What are its key strengths and weaknesses? And finally, what's required for the Indian manufacturing sector to leverage its strengths, upgrade its skills and competitive positioning to be able to capitalize on the current opportunities that are opening up. So 3 areas, as I said. What's the disruption? What's the state of Indian manufacturing? And what's required to capitalize on the opportunities? So looking at the disruption, I think why has this topic suddenly become, let's say, more talked about? It's always been talked about, but maybe much more now. We all know that the COVID pandemic in the last 2 years has exposed the world to its supply chain vulnerabilities, as lockdowns and travel restrictions have disrupted economic activities around the globe. We have seen for ourselves how increasing ocean freight by multiple times, how non-availability of containers and ships have made our life difficult for our exporters and our importers. And I'm sure we all know how the same has impacted other economies as well. So it's not surprising that most companies have woken up to this fact that their supply chains are vulnerable and they need to do something about it. But most companies would like to improve their supply chain resilience in, let's say, one of the three ways. Increasing your inventory of critical items because you have a longer lead time now, perhaps, or uncertain lead time. You diversify your supply base. China is the favorite factory of the world, has been for many years now. And third one could be a nearshoring or localization or even regionalization. So you don't depend on a country which is far off because the supply chain is uncertain, and you look at your supply base nearer to your geography, whether inside the country or near to that geography. So this is what is the problem. This is the problem statement. Now, let's look at the state of the Indian manufacturing sector. So and if we look at, let's say, evaluate and review the last 10, 15 years, what we would see is that the Indian manufacturing sector has grown by an average of about 9 to 10%, let's say, over between the period of 2006 to 2012. And I've picked up some data from McKinsey reports. Between 2012 and 2018, this growth declined to 7.4%. So it went up and then it's come down. Well, they're still growing. If we now look at this share of manufacturing in India's GDP, it was, let's say, over 15% in the year 2000. And in the year 2020, it is a shade over 17%. So it's gone up. So the manufacturing sector has improved its share of GDP. But let's look at some comparison. If we take the example of Vietnam, during the same 20 years period, their manufacturing share of their GDP has more than doubled. So while we have moved up from 15 to, let's say, 17%, they have doubled. If you look at the economic benefits, and the government often goes by that, the manufacturing sector's share of employment has only risen by 1% compared to services, which grew by 5% in the last 13 to 15 years. So manufacturing, hasn't really taken off the way we would have wanted to. Then what should we be doing? Well, should we look at manufacturing as a whole, or should we be looking at some pieces of it? And one of the views is that we should be looking at certain pieces. We should be looking at those high potential manufacturing hubs in the country which have the potential to grow and be competitive on a world scale. So what are those manufacturing value chains? And again, identified by many, but also saw it in the McKinsey report, is some of them are common, well known also. Let's say chemicals, pharmaceuticals, auto, textiles, metals and steel, aerospace and defense, capital goods, electronics, renewable energies. So they've identified about 11 odd manufacturing value chains. So this say that if you focus on these, you have a much better chance of developing your manufacturing and actually taking advantage of the disruptions that are happening today. Okay, so then what makes us feel that India has the strength? Well, availability of abundant raw material, know-how and manufacturing skill, relatively cheaper labor, large domestic market. But I think we tend to forget the entrepreneurship ability of the Indians. I think pretty large number, I think more Indians are employed as entrepreneurs than in jobs. And of course, the latest impetus from the government on Make in India. All these are good strengths. But despite that, the Indian manufacturing sector, why does it create limited value? So, well, we all know the high cost of infrastructure, poor logistics. Mr. Chakravarti was just mentioning about the Gati Shakti initiative of the government, which is so timely. but again, haven't been spoken about it for so many years. High power cost, high cost of capital. Then we have a very fragmented industry base. We focus, at least the government tries to focus a lot on the MSMEs, a large number of small companies, but does it have the scale and the strength to compete in the global with the global value chains? My personal view is I very much doubt that. In fact, there are lots of problems with smaller companies. First of all, if we look at some data and find that you will have most of the value comes in from the larger companies, and it's we have seen that across the world, whether it's China or Korea or Thailand or Indonesia. You find that larger companies tend to create more value compared to the smaller companies. Those smaller companies have their own advantages. In the case of India, these smaller companies do not have the not only do they not have the financial strength and wherewithal to scale up, invest in high quality talent, go in for automation and digitization, or have the ability to innovate that could help them attain efficiency and productivity. So this is a major issue with a lot of Indian industries. We also do not have enough, they do not make enough effort on building strong brands or spending money and effort on building distribution networks, marketing. So these are some of the disadvantages, the weaknesses of the Indian manufacturing sector. Well, it has some key advantages, access to raw material like iron ore, bauxite, etc. And we talked about it. So, how do we go about it? What is it that we need to do? The Indian manufacturing sector, to establish a strong foothold in the export market, needs to develop further. It needs to expand and build scale. It needs to focus on, of course, as I said, marketing and distribution networks, technological upgradation, complying with international quality standards and regulations. You might be complying to BIS or whatever is your local standard here in India. But does that help you in being able to get access to the export markets? How many companies invest in R&D? Even the larger companies, what is their share of investments in R&D? And of course, the latest one is sustainability and decarbonization. I think, despite India's commitment to be carbon neutral by 2070, we have a long way to go. And of course, 2070 is a long way off. Perhaps that's the mental thinking at the moment. But this is going to come. Europe is going to perhaps introduce a carbon border adjustment tax. Government of India might follow suit. So we need to be all prepared to be able to compete at the global stage. So there are lots of, I think, areas for us to work on. From a government point of view, Mr. Subir Chakraborty did mention a few, but just kind of adding a couple of points there. In addition to sufficient fiscal incentives, availability of capital, I think if there is support for the high-tech sector, and particularly, let's say, these 10 or 11 value chains, and the government provides sufficient fiscal incentives, which through the PLI scheme it started to do in some places, I think these value chains will get the necessary push. And of course, it needs to create a stable framework. And another one, many of these manufacturing hubs needs an ecosystem of vendors, which have to operate in clusters. For example, we have seen that in the case of automobiles, and that's why Indian automobile sector is so strong. So I would say, to sum it up, India has this unique opportunity to capture the current, the opportunities that are coming up from the realignment of supply chains post-COVID. It's for us to take advantage of that, or we can continue to talk what we have been doing for the last several years. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Sandeep. That was definitely very informative. And you threw up some very important perspectives on Indian manufacturing. You mentioned a point on large companies and MSME. So, I just like to present the view from the government side. one of the reasons why government supports MSME in most states in India, or perhaps in all states, is because MSMEs today are the real job creators. Now, if you look at large companies, they also have expansion programs, but the employment potential in large companies which are going for increasing automation, there it becomes limited. So earlier, if one could take, let's say, 2,000 people for a certain project, now people would take maybe 500 or maybe even less, because there's so much of artificial intelligence and automation which is coming in. So the government today feels, most governments, that, then how do I provide jobs to people? Okay, on one side, you have expansion in the large sector, but then that is not going to provide jobs for the people. And the people actually, they are the ones who ultimately cast their vote. So politically, it is important. So that is why most governments support this MSME, because they feel they will provide the necessary jobs in the state. So do you have any view on this, Sandeep?
No, so I think very right. I think you very rightly pointed out that the job creation is one of the fundamental drivers of a government policy, and therefore, focus on the MSME sector is important. I am not at all saying we should not. All I'm saying is that the MSME sector does not have the inherent strengths to build up scale, does not have the financial and the skill sets, the financial wherewithal, and the skill sets to be able to compete and to innovate. How do they increase productivity? How do they innovate fast enough to be able to compete at the global scale? That's the problem. Now, we've also seen data that it's the larger companies which tend to be more productive. They tend to be creating more value. And there is data on this pretty high, even in India. There's another set of data which says, if you look at the top 1,000 companies in India, and these are the large companies, and this report says that 700 out of 1,000 have actually destroyed value. So we can also argue that even the large companies aren't doing well. So that's because of the inherent issues that are there. But relatively speaking, it's the larger companies which will have the financial wherewithal and the strength to be able to innovate and increase their productivity and to be able to compete at the global stage. I think that's the main point. The smaller companies have lower overheads. They are far more agile. So there are certain advantages. The question is, if you want to capture the value chains at the international stage, you need to migrate there. And so it has to be a balance, and both have to go up. The other issue that I wanted to highlight is that, look, the large companies are automating, I agree, so automation and Industry 4.0 practices being implemented, technologies being implemented are obviously the way to go, and it's happening all around the world. But I think we need to understand that there would also be a lot more new jobs that will get created, which is more based on knowledge rather than more on unskilled or semi-skilled labor. So there would be a transition. It will be similar to when computerization started and there were a lot of concerns. So it's a matter of time before it happens. And I think the faster we adapt, there will be some pain in the transition period, but the faster we adopt, the better it is for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandeep. That was certainly helpful. Now, Government of India has floated PLI schemes across sectors. And as per the last count, it is 1,85,782 crores is the amount of money which they have allocated for the various PLI schemes. So do you think, Sandeep, this will go a long way in kickstarting the Indian manufacturing across some of these very crucial sectors?
So certainly, I think this push is helping. And I've heard various commentators talking about the same, that this is going to help and this is going to push. The question that I raised was, have we identified the right value chains? Of course, the government has talked about electronics and semiconductors, and I think that's rightly identified. We need to identify the right value chains which have the potential to be able to compete at the world stage. If the government of India does that, and therefore gives incentives to those firms, which should be limited, time bound, it can't be forever, and gives them that support. Why? because you have high cost of capital, you have high cost of logistics and infrastructure. So we have certain inherent disadvantages. So while you go on for Gati Shakti and improve your logistics and focus on your infrastructure, which is the right thing to do, there would be a transition period. And this is an opportunity where the disruption in the supply chain post-COVID has thrown open those opportunities for the Indian manufacturing to step in. If we step in now, we can reap much more advantage than, let's say, we do it 3 to 5 years down the line.
Right. So thanks, Sandeep. There's a question from Shiladitya Chatterjee. I think I'll take this one. Non-participation in RCEP and regional cooperation arrangements could be a problem. What is your view? You see, from an economic point of view, the more such cooperation you have, or the more such agreements you sign, it should help your trade and business, and certainly manufacturing. There's no doubt about it. However, when a country takes a call on such cooperation arrangements, then it is not only an economic decision, but it is also a political decision in the best interest of the country. So somewhere there has to be a balance between what is in good economic interest and what is in good political interest for the country. I think this is very important, because industrial relations, economic cooperation, they all go hand in hand. And you cannot really look at one of these things in isolation. In systems theory, there is a very simple concept that if you want to optimize the overall system, then you have to sub-optimize the subsystems. Because if you want to optimize the subsystems, then your overall system gets sub-optimized. So this is, a very good example of that theory, that you have issues on international relations, issues on economy, issues on international trade, and you need to then sub-optimize all these individual subsystems so that at the overall level, the country gains. So this is a very simple answer to that, but this is what all countries do. And I'm sure India is also doing the same. So now moving on to the next question, India's net zero pledge and its impact on Indian manufacturing growth. I can take this one. You see, like all other countries, India has also taken some targets in the COP26, which was held in Glasgow. And I think it is important for all of us to understand that commerce cannot again exist in isolation or in exclusion of our planet Earth. If the Earth does not remain, commerce will not remain, obviously. So therefore, it is important, while not trying to do anything which will be totally disruptive. For example, suddenly discontinuing with all fossil fuel based energy generation, or some such drastic step. I think it is not only us in India, but globally all over the world. We have to first understand and appreciate the fact, and I think this is well understood by everybody, that the first priority is the planet. We have to save, first and foremost, the planet doesn't remain, we don't remain, and commerce, of course, and manufacturing, it's no point talking about it. Now, if we have to go from point A to point B, there has to be a certain roadmap or a path to take us there. And we must all seriously introspect and see what is possible, because what are the things which are, which we have to consider. One is, of course, business and commerce. Second is jobs. Because if people don't have jobs, they will not have enough to eat, and there could be a civil unrest. So therefore, it is necessary to progress from the present situation to wherever we want to progress in graduated steps, well-intentioned steps, steps which are sustainable. I think this is what is required for each country to do this and to navigate this path, because the option of not doing anything does not exist. So I feel, this is my personal opinion. So how will it impact Indian manufacturing? Indian manufacturing also will have to traverse these steps in line with guidelines of Government of India and depend more and more on clean energy, on green energy. I'll give you one simple paradox today, which we have. We are all talking about electric vehicles, aren't we? So we all want to move to clean form of mobility, clean energy, and so on and so forth. But then how are we producing these cells? Whether it's lithium ion, sodium ion, whatever it is that we are producing. Are we dependent on fossil energy to develop those the clean energy we are talking about? Because if we are using fossil energy to generate alternate chemistry cells, so you are just distributing your pollution from, let's say, from one place to another place, but the overall situation does not improve. So ultimately you require clean energy generation to be able to provide clean energy mobility, clean mobility or green mobility for you. So that's the ultimate objective. And we have to go towards that. Of course, there are lots of things to be done. If you have to depend more and more on green energy, and we have a target of 500 gigawatts by 2030, which is a very ambitious target, because along with that, you will require facilities such as energy storage stations, because as you know, green energy is not generated all the time. Solar energy you generate when there is sun, and wind energy when there's wind, and so on and so forth. So you require energy storage stations to be able to store that energy and to be able to provide that energy during your peak hours. So a lot of infrastructure development is required. And I think government is doing the right thing by raising these issues and taking the right steps in a graduated manner. That is I think the key thing here is that we don't do anything which disrupts everything, but we nonetheless move slowly towards that path. So now the next question is, advantage over China, especially under current disruption, infrastructure development can push the manufacturing sector. And in the current budget, we have seen primary focus is on infra. How far that is important, according to you, to become globally competitive? So I think we have already taken that question.
Yes, sir.
Sandeep,
Yes,
would you
sir.
like to, we have taken that question or no? Yeah, I think already answered.
We have discussed, sir. Already
Yes,
we
yes.
have discussed.
MSME is playing a crucial role in manufacturing growth of the country, and we have seen globally MSMEs are using cutting-edge technology and have become advanced in every aspect. Under the huge spread of COVID, they have proved how resilient and flexible business can be done that is lacking in India, and how can we facilitate them? So Sandeep, would you like to take this question on this MSME?
Yeah, I think we did discuss about it. We said that there is a balance which is required between remaining an MSME, because obviously we have a large number of MSMEs in the country and we need to, the government needs to support them. But I think the message that I was trying to give is that many of them need to build up scale, get the necessary capital, innovate, increase their productivity, and all that will only happen if you are able to increase your scale of operations. You need to, many of them do not have strong brands, distribution networks. How do you compete at the world stage? In India, it's fine. So that's the point. Our question is not about being competitive in India and being able to capture a pie here. The question here is, how do you capture value from the current disruption in the supply chains around the world? And that's not easy. If you go to China, and we have seen that, how effective and how strong they are. If you go to one particular city, one industry, and there are lots and lots of manufacturers, selling the same ware. You have so many options. You just don't see that in India. So it's something we need to work on. And the other, I think, angle, which you, in fact, just Mr. Chakraborty, you just talked about a little, is the fact that to be able to be sustainable, to be able to decarbonize in the face of the climate change that we are all beginning to see, what is the effort being made by MSMEs in this field? how much they are aware, how much they are sensitized. Because when we say 2070, it's a long way off. People can't see that. And therefore, the efforts made by many companies, including MSMEs, and I'm not saying it's only MSMEs, I think it's applicable for almost most of our companies. We're still taking baby steps. If you look at Europe, they are taking some really bold ones. Even China, for that matter, they have made, especially I can tell you about the steel sector. What they have said is that between 2020 and 2025, they're going to rapidly change the state of the industry. And that's making them uncompetitive. And the Indian steel industry is becoming more competitive on the world stage compared to China today. So China is cutting down on production. China has taken some very strong targets on ultra low emissions. China has said that I will increase my scrap consumption in the steel making from the current 20% to 30%, which means you will cut down on your carbon emissions compared to the iron ore route and the blast furnace route, which produces far more carbon. So they are taking some strong steps. In the process, they will become uncompetitive, relatively speaking. But that's what I was saying. There will be a transition, and we all need to go through that. The earlier we do, the better it is. Thanks.
Thanks, Sandeep. So,
Sir, Arun Mishra, our guest of honor, has joined. We're just checking whether.
yes, welcome, Mr. Mishra.
Yes, just.
Yeah. Sorry, I was late because we had a business plan meeting.
Okay. So welcome, Mr. Mishra. We have been discussing on Indian manufacturing and whether we can capitalize in the current environment. So would you like to say a few words on this topic?
I think this is one of the most discussed topic as CEO in every forum and not even within the organization. Perhaps the opportunity that India is losing is because of COVID, people have got distracted. Otherwise, things could have been eased up even faster than what it is happening, so that more capital development can take place. All the things in the change in the industry we are seeing, either it is an IBC takeover or merger and acquisition or brownfield expansion. New capital conversion, new capital investments are not that fast and furious. So that is where I think the thing is need to change, which is again how quickly you can get permissions, which is the basic what they say, roti kapra makan of industry. How quickly you can get the permission, how quickly you can get the pollution clearances, how quickly you can get the land. And that's where I think the focus has somehow got deviated in last 2-3 years because of COVID and all that. Otherwise, before that, every state government was always working on how to make life easier for investment. So that is one area. Second is the faith in industry that they can put up their own self-certified systems. That has to come. Unless that comes, as long as it is to be checked by somebody and on his clearance, the industry will move. Today, it has to be self-certified. Like I have started recruiting ex-DGMS officials for my mine assessment. And they're a part of Hindustan Zinc. So I will have a battery of ex-DGMS directors who will do who will give me the certificate as a CEO that your mines are safer. I don't need to depend upon a government agency. Similarly, companies can be asked to put their own environment cells with ex-government officials who will do the self-certification. That is an area to work with, and if more and more certification provision has to be there in the rules. Third is most important is consistency of rules. You take out one order, then let it play for some time, and the interpretation of that order till the bottommost portion should be same. Not that, okay, from the center this order has come, but then the ground person starts saying, but this does not apply here, this does not apply there, and those kinds of things. I think those focus has to come back to greenfield investment. Everybody is busy on IBC, merger and acquisition, so which is not creating new capacity, which is maybe making things which are not operating, making them operative, but not creating new capacity. And we have to consider creating new capacity. At least in steel, if we have to be 300 million ton, new capacities have to come. In zinc, if I have to be 1.5 million ton, new capacities have to come. So that should be the focus of this economy now.
So thank you, Mr. Mishra. What is your view on this green energy, do you think it is going to be a disruptor or it is going to be a facilitator for Indian manufacturing going forward?
No, it is going to change life because all of us, even in my case, I am looking at converting 50% of my energy by 2023, which is hardly another 1 year, by next year into green power, that is 24 by 7 renewed power. And the models which are coming are, it is not only generated renewed power, it is stored renewed power and supplied uniformly across 24 hours and 7 days a week. So that is the solution, which can be a combination of hydro as well as solar and wind. That's a perfect solution and available at a comfortable, at a reasonable price. It has to go that way. Why it is important for us? India has huge coal, no doubt about it. But it is important for us because those who are into products which are globally competitive, whether you look at flat steel products, galvanized products, or we are into suppliers to foreign companies, the pushback from various climate conferences is under scope 1, scope 2, everybody has to come green. So if I delay, then there will be a huge risk to my product sales. So by this way or that way, green energy has to come, and there the technology is changing fast. The sooner we adopt, the cheaper it will be going forward. That's how I look at it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mishra. Now, as someone who is headquartered outside the state, there is a question which has been raised by someone in the audience. What is the fate of manufacturing growth in Bengal? Any specific suggestions for policy level intervention that can help the manufacturers in this region? We have seen a huge spread of startups in the service sectors, and in compared to that, the growth of startups in manufacturing sector is much less.
So why? I will address it two ways. One, culturally, I have been brought up in Bengal. It's not I am out of Bengal. I have studied in Ramakrishna Mission, St. Xavier's College, Park Street, and then into IIT Kharagpur. So I have seen 1970s decade of Bengal, the loss of education during the Naxalite movement, and I have seen the 80s and 90s as well. The one and only one thing is Bengal has moved quite substantially towards a cultural or Sanskritic, as they call, culturally appreciating money making is a necessary part of life, which was not there in the 70s. Money making was culturally not a great thing in Bengal culture, but now it is coming back. I think that is the starting point for industrialization. That from childhood, people need to be taught that if you are intelligent, you should be able to make money. To make money, you have to put up industries through which one can make money. Second, general governance towards industry has to improve. I have no comment on any particular government, but general governance, meaning including bureaucracy and everybody, that it is not merely running few great colleges is important for a state. It is also equally important for a state is to run great industrial institutions. A country or state should be proud that I am hosting this particular industry, that particular industry, apart from just running Presidency College or Hindu College or St. Xavier's College or Vishwabharati and things like that. So that bureaucracy has to understand that. And I think we have Bengal, I keep saying we because I belong to that state for quite some time. That legacy of not appreciating physical labor is a problem. Physical labor is to be as appreciated as educational or intellectual supremacy. So that has to be, it's physical labor is important. And we cannot say in Bengal, physical labor will be done by people who come from outside the state. And we are here only to do office desk job. That cannot survive for long. Once you start appreciating physical labor, then what happens is, I see in Rajasthan, we run mines, 70-90% of my workers are local. They love physical labor and they love earning more money. They love running the toughest equipment in the underground in the toughest condition as long as they are getting more money. And they are happy that way. And that they are not saying, I want an office, air conditioning, this, that. So that love for physical labor has to come. And if these things are done by government propagating culturally or in the educational institutions, I think things will change. And I think Bengal has changed a lot from the 70s of complete stoppage of industry to where it is today, but it can do much more on manufacturing. It has everything. It has got coal, it has got hydro, it has got thermal power, it has got intelligent people, it has got great technical institutions. We used to respect George Telegraph Institute as one of the best as far as diploma training is concerned. So it has got everything.
So thanks, Arun. That I'm sure the Bengal Chamber has taken note of some of your very valid suggestions, and they'll take it forward during the interactions with the government. So I have one question. Do you feel, Mr. Mishra, that the mining sector, rejuvenation of the mining sector can become a boon for West Bengal, particularly in the context of the new coal deposits which have been found? And so what is your feeling on this?
No, mining, GDP starts, I always say GDP starts on two counts, one above the ground through agriculture, below the ground through mining. Rest of the industry, rest of the economy is a product or modified, a number of times modified product of that. And if this sector survives, then service sector survives. Service sector cannot by itself run on a bubble where there is no physical product, but there is always an intellectual exchange and there is a price for that. So below ground, if we have to do, the mining sector has to improve. Bengal has a huge prospect. Of course, coal mining is there, but it should also look at a lot of coal gasification projects. And Bengal has a good potential for either embedded gas or in situ gasification of coal and then extracting gas rather than extracting coal, and should improve that part of the world. And I think Bengal has also struck in 24 Parganas quite a good amount of oil below the ground, and should look at around Sundarban. I'm sure there would be oil deposits and must look at as many crude oil deposits. It can extend up to from Sundarban to maybe North 24 Parganas is a very, very susceptible portion where there could be very good oil deposit. Absolutely. And there could be lignite in the Duars area on the northern side. There could be in the Himalayan fold, there could be lignite also. So there is huge potential. Should be looked at.
So good. So thank you, Arun. Now, one question for Sandeep is that the huge number of startups and the unicorns that we are seeing today in the national context, do you think these unicorns are really going to be the engine for growth in this decade and the next, or do you think that it's a lot of that is just a bubble that will not be there after some time, and one should have graduated expectations out of this huge boom which is taking place today and drawing a lot of young talent into this enterprise?
Yeah, so you're right. I think it's drawing a lot of young talent. They get attracted, and I think everybody thinks they can become the next, let's say the Steve Jobs or whatever. So in fact, I've had when I was in Tata Steel, my executive assistant one day came and told me that, and he was doing very well, that I need to go. And I said, why? He said, I am being given a co-founder status in a startup. So, and so I said, what's the business model and how are we going to monetize? So that wasn't clear. So not surprisingly, a year later, when he spoke to me, he had moved to another startup and then a third one. So this happens. I think more than 95% of the startups fail. But so there's a lot of hype, but of course, there's also a merit in some of them, doing well. Even from my current experience in Tata Metallics, we have engaged with a lot of startups, especially on our journey of digitization. And we're struggling to actually find good ones. We say in our enthusiasm, and we've kind of given quite a few, and we then realize no, they're not up to it. So I think it's going to take some time. We need to moderate our expectations, but I think we should let them develop, and and that's the way for all of us to go. So, but moderate our expectations. That's what I would say.
Right. Thanks, Sandeep. That was definitely very informative. So Arun, I have one question on reskilling and skilling, because today Indian manufacturing is certainly dependent on the technical pool that we have in the country, And what is your feeling today, the kind of engineers that we are generating out of the engineering colleges? Would you say that they are basically trained in their laptop, or they are the kind of engineers that you feel can be working on the ground? So, because this is a comment which I've often heard, that, today's engineers, civil engineer doesn't know how to start making a building, but he knows, of course, Word and Excel and all the programs and Java and so on and so forth, Python and what all you have. So do you think there is a certain disconnect between, because if we want to really grow in manufacturing, and I'm limiting this to manufacturing, we require engineers to be able to do an engineering job. Otherwise, how do we get the skill?
Correct, correct. No, that's a challenge. And when I take interviews, I also find everybody says I'm good in Python and I'm good in this, and I'm looking for digital analytic kind of job, and nobody wants to come back to brass tacks. And second is, okay, it's fine that you want to make a life choice, is fine, but understanding of physics, chemistry, maths of class 8 to class 12 is also equally poor. It's not that his engineering knowledge is poor. If you go down to class 8, 9, 10 questions also, that's also equally poor. So that means they are product of only objective type question answer kind of a regime. Fine, so that's the new regime. But I guess our recruitment pattern has to change, which I am telling my organization, that instead of recruiting somebody at fourth year, one need to recruit at second year. So what happens is, from second year, third year and fourth year, apart from the curriculum that the institution runs, the industry needs to run their own curriculum with the students that they select. And then also what happens is, at least the students who want to do a manufacturing job and are getting trained, so we need to train them in the campus. I see my own daughter who is now in computers. I see many of the international firms exactly doing that. They have started recruiting them in second year, and they have got what they call mentorship program. So a certain number of contact hours are fixed. So second year, third year, fourth year, through those contact hours, they will prepare their candidate. So industry is not waiting that they will come out with a knowledge. They are saying, we will invest in the students so that when they pass out and join us, even if say 20% of them join and 80% don't even join, those 20% are fully grown and they would require only 2 or 3 months of induction to finally get onto the job. So that is a model that we need to look at. This, our recruitment model has to change. We can't be having industry in 1990s while the world has moved to 2022. So we also need to move to 2022 with a different model.
So thanks, Arun. That was certainly a very novel idea that you have put forward. At least I was not aware of it. So it's a very good concept that industry takes that step forward and actually starts to mentor people in engineering colleges, so that they are better trained to serve the ends of needs of industry. So with that, we are on the top of the hour. So I would like to thank both Sandeep and Arun for participating very actively in this discussion. And I hope the participants and the audience were able to gain something out of it. So thank you all.
So much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you, Arun.
Thank you. Thanks, Sandeep. Nice seeing you. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chakraborty. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. With this, we conclude this session on focused on manufacturing. We are greatly thankful to all the audience, to all our esteemed speakers, and also our sponsors, gold sponsor NMDC Limited, silver sponsors Bandhan Bank Limited, Indorama India Private Limited, PricewaterhouseCoopers Private Limited, Tata Steel Downstream Products Limited, associate sponsors Exide Industry Limited, Holdia Water, Tax Connect Advisory Services LLP. So we'll be back after 1 hour 15 minutes. So please stay tuned with us. Thank you.